The palace walls were high, so high that anyone who saw them stood in awe. But behind those walls lay a truth no one knew. Those walls hid all the secrets of Rome's emperor. And the one secret that carried the weight of Marcus Aurelius' soul was a gladiator, a simple, ordinary fighter. Rome knew Marcus as a wise ruler. They saw him as the sage of his age, silent, calm, learned. An emperor who shaped his fate with his own breath. A painter who drew and carved destiny with his own will. But no one knew the man he met in his youth. No one knew him. No page of history carried his name. A gladiator who lived by blood, breathed the iron scent of the arena, and had made peace with death. A warrior sworn to fight to his last breath, thirsty for battle. And from him, Marcus learned a single truth. Books do not teach survival, scars do, and those scars speak endlessly, to those wise enough to see and read them. The palace was full of philosophers, each trying to teach what they knew. Teachers, thinkers, scholars. They all taught Marcus the mind, but the man in the arena taught him the breath, taught him how to control himself, how to stand in battle, how to swallow fear, how silence becomes a shield. Those lessons came from a gladiator, a man everyone underestimated, a man no one considered worthy. Yet that simple warrior became Marcus's greatest teacher, a mentor forged by pain, speaking from the depths of experience. And this friendship was hidden, because the blood of a gladiator could never touch the blood of an emperor. Neither Roman law nor the Senate would ever allow such a bond. But they had something in common, a single bridge between their worlds. They were both silent, both masters of their own will, both capable of carrying their thoughts through war, without ever raising their voices. One survived in the arena, one survived in the empire. Both were fighting battles in their own realms. Marcus hid this friendship not out of shame. On the contrary, this bond had become the only light, illuminating the darker corners of his soul. That gladiator awakened the leader within Marcus, brought him to the surface. Today, I will tell you about this friendship the palace never heard of, a bond born in blood, grown in silence, and shaped by fate. Because sometimes, the thing that makes a man an emperor is not the crown, but the single silent figure, walking beside him. When Marcus Aurelius stepped out of the marble corridors of the palace and descended into the dark tunnels beneath the Colosseum, he heard Rome's breath for the first time. He felt it in his bones, not the silence of the throne, not the cries of the people, not the words of philosophers, but the cold breath of death itself, its icy truth. In the corridors below, torches flickered, and dried streaks of blood stretched across the walls like ancient warnings. With every step, the smell of metal grew stronger. With every step, another truth struck his face. And as a young man, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility here for the first time. He experienced it for the very first time. What called him to the arena was not curiosity, not pride, not entertainment. None of these. It was a friendship not yet born, not yet visible, but already real. A bond formed between a teacher and a student, a bond that destiny itself had written. When the gladiator was brought before him, their eyes met. In Marcus's eyes, the searching gaze of a philosopher. In the gladiator's eyes, the weary determination of a man who had survived death countless times. A man whose posture carried exhaustion and strength at the same time. Neither of them spoke. Words were unnecessary, because to speak in the arena was to die. But silence was survival. And this was the gladiator's first lesson, given without Marcus asking, and without the gladiator saying a single word. Without speaking, Marcus received his first teaching. To understand such a lesson without words One had to be a true sage, and Marcus was exactly that. He was a warrior in the making. Marcus watched the way the man walked, his steps, his breath, how he remained unshaken despite the weight on his shoulders, how he stood upright, firm, grounded, aware. In each movement, there was a truth. When life strikes you, learn not to move, learn to breathe. This man was not a philosophy written in books, not a lesson crafted in the comfort of quiet chambers. His wisdom was carved from real experience, experience learned under blood, pain, and survival. His skin was cracked, his hands calloused, his face scarred, but every scar held a lesson. Every scar whispered truth to those wise enough to listen. Real lessons, earned through suffering, and painful for those who understood them. Before the fight began, the gladiator leaned toward Marcus. With a whisper no one else could hear, he said one sentence. Sometimes surviving means not attacking, but standing still. Years later, Marcus would write this line in meditations as, "Patience is the invisible weapon of war." When the gladiator entered the arena, Marcus tried to understand what he was doing. The man did not rush, did not charge, did not shout. He raised his shield, steadied his breath, and simply waited for his opponent. And Marcus suddenly realized, silence is a strategy. No one in the palace had taught him this. Philosophers taught speech, commanders taught shouting. But this man, he was teaching him silence. When the opponent attacked, the gladiator did not retreat. He stood firm, as if the enemy's rage melted against his stillness. Marcus's eyes widened. For the first time, he saw a man who wasn't simply fighting. He was controlling the fight itself. A man who stood not with anger, but with awareness. That day, Marcus understood. True power comes not from the loudest voice, but from the deepest silence. When the fight ended, the gladiator had won. But the victory did not belong to Marcus. What Marcus gained was the opening of the first door to the war inside himself. And there, on those blood-stained stones, a hidden bond was born, one that would change his destiny forever. Between an imperial heir and a condemned man, between a philosopher and a warrior, a silent friendship hidden inside the noise of the arena. The strongest teacher is the one who does not speak. The corridors were dark, as always. As always, they covered Rome's secrets like a heavy curtain. But that day, the darkness looked different in Marcus's eyes. Because for the first time, he saw how chains could look fitting on a wise man. He understood this. After the fight, as the gladiator was taken back to his cell, Marcus followed him. The palace servants looked at him in confusion. No one expected this. The Senate was shocked. The people were shocked. The generals were shocked. Everyone was stunned. An imperial heir walking beside a condemned man. It was unheard of in Rome. But Marcus did not stop walking, because a voice within him whispered, "This man will teach me something no book ever could." When they reached the cell, the gladiator sat down. The chains on his arms clinked softly, yet there was no rebellion in his face, no anger, no despair. It was as if the chains did not hold him, as if he was the one holding them. Marcus leaned forward and watched him quietly. And for the first time, he asked a spoken question. "Hasn't this life broken you?" The gladiator lifted his head. In his eyes were the ashes of a long war extinguished, but still burning beneath the surface. Then he spoke slowly. "Life does not break a man. A man chooses to break." This sentence struck Marcus like an arrow, because everything he had been taught in the palace was about external forces, justice, politics, power, order. But this man, this blood-soaked warrior, had delivered a deeper truth in a single line. Marcus asked, "Then what makes you strong?" The gladiator looked down at the chain on his wrist before answering. "What makes me strong is not freedom," he said. "It's knowing what I refuse to bow to." Marcus stiffened. It was a truth even philosophers hesitated to speak aloud. The gladiator continued, "Those who think they are free are often the most bound of all. The nobles are bound to their power, the wealthy to their gold, the people to their fears, the soldiers to their victories. But I am bound to nothing." Marcus frowned. "How can that be? You're in chains." The gladiator gave a faint smile. "The chains bind my body, but they do not bind my mind." Then he leaned in, whispering, "If a man's chains are inside him, no palace in the world can set him free." Marcus stepped back. This one sentence shattered everything Rome's philosophers had taught him, because what this man revealed was a truth learned not in schools, but in the dirt of the arena. True freedom is not breaking the world outside you, but breaking the chains inside you. Marcus remained silent. The gladiator spoke again. "When I fight, I trust nothing, not my shield, not my sword, not even my strength. All can break, but there is one thing I trust: my mind, because no blade can cut it." These words shook Marcus deeply. He realized he had never looked at his own mind in this way. Philosophers taught him how to use reason, but none had taught him how to protect it. In that moment, Marcus understood. This man could be my teacher. The gladiator lifted his chains, looked straight into Marcus's eyes, and said, "One day you will become emperor. But first, become the master of yourself." Marcus's breath caught. It felt as if this sentence had opened the door to his future. And in that moment, a bond was born, an invisible thread stretching from the gladiator's scarred hands to the clear, untested mind of a young emperor, a friendship unknown to the people, unheard by the palace, unwritten by history, yet a friendship that shaped Marcus's destiny. A chain does not show what binds you. It shows what you refuse to bow to. The next day, Marcus left behind the marble walls of the palace and slipped quietly into the arena. No guard noticed him. No servant stopped him. No one imagined that an imperial heir would step into a place smelling of blood and dust. No one would have believed it. To most people, an emperor was a man of luxury, far removed from hardship, untouched by suffering, someone who lived above the struggles of ordinary men. But Marcus was thinking. More than that, he was wondering. The gladiator's words from the night before had driven a nail into his mind. If a man's chains are inside him, no palace can save him. He had come to the arena to understand that sentence, because some truths are not found in books. They are buried in the dirt. As soon as he entered, dry dust hit his face. Screams echoed from afar. Iron clashed against iron. Shields trembled. The sharp smell of blood cut through the air. But Marcus noticed something else. The gladiators' faces were not filled with fear, but with a hardened acceptance, a strange, unspoken calm, as if they had stopped negotiating with life and accepted that death walked beside them. And that acceptance, that strange calm, was a kind of freedom no ordinary man could understand. Does freedom grow in the shadow of death? Marcus wondered. When the gladiator noticed Marcus approaching, he gave a small nod. No surprise, no confusion. As if he had known Marcus would come, as if he had been waiting. Marcus moved closer slowly. His eyes wandered over the dry ground of the arena. Every handful of dust held the memory of a life, of fear, of courage, of a scream swallowed by the crowd. Then the gladiator raised his sword, not to attack, but to offer. "Try," he said. "Hold it." Marcus stepped back. "I'm not a warrior," the gladiator smiled. "And I am not a philosopher, yet here we both are learning." Marcus hesitated, then reached for the sword. It was cold, but the cold was real, a reality no book could ever mimic. "Now," the gladiator said. "How do you defend against a strike?" Marcus frowned. "Why are you showing me this?" The gladiator answered, "Because one day Rome will strike you, and that strike will be sharper than any blade." He stepped back, set his staff into the ground, and a lesson began. A sword sliced through the air. Marcus lifted the shield too late. The second blow forced him off balance. The third nearly made him fall. And with every strike, the gladiator whispered, "Don't think, feel. Don't think, feel. Don't think, feel." Marcus's mind clouded, his thoughts tangled. "Philosophy is thinking," he protested. The gladiator shook his head. "And that is why you lose." Then he stopped, pressed the staff into the ground, looked straight into Marcus's eyes. Life won't always give you time to think. Sometimes it will hit you before you can breathe. That's why you must learn to control your breath first. The one who rules his breath rules his destiny. Marcus's heart pounded. That sentence was the seed of hundreds of reflections he would one day write in meditations. When the lesson ended, Marcus looked at his hands. They were trembling, but not from fear, from a deep, awakening awareness. The gladiator asked, "What did you learn?" Marcus steadied his breath, then whispered, "Freedom is not the absence of chains, but the ability to control the mind, even when chains exist." The gladiator smiled. "That's it," he said. "You are no longer learning to fight. You are learning to live." For the first time, Marcus felt strength, not in his muscles, but in his mind. As he walked out of the arena, the gladiator called after him, "Remember, Marcus, one day you will rule Rome, but today, you learn to rule yourself." Days passed, yet the sentence Marcus had heard in the arena, "Freedom begins inside the chains," slipped even into the darkest corners of his mind. It showed itself everywhere. In the palace, everyone laughed, everyone talked. Politicians plotted, generals strategized, philosophers argued. But inside Marcus, there was silence, a cold silence, a thinking silence, a silence only true sages could understand, the kind of silence that belongs to someone shaped by inner storms. Because under the palace, in the darkness of the arena, there was now one man who knew Marcus's truth, a gladiator, a slave, a prisoner, an unnamed fighter, but in Marcus's eyes, a teacher, a man who taught life the harsh way, a man who revealed truth in its rawest form. One evening, Marcus slipped into the arena again. The sky was dark. The wind lifted dust. The arena doors creaked open in the hands of a sleepy guard. When the gladiator saw him, he was not surprised. As if he had felt Marcus coming, as if he had been waiting. "You came again," he said. "So you have questions." Marcus lowered his head. "Yes, many." The gladiator picked up a broken shield and set it on the ground, then sat beside it. A simple gesture, yet for Marcus, it meant this: an imperial heir and a slave were sitting on the same earth. And strangely, Marcus felt it was right. "Marcus," the gladiator said, "you know every man in the arena fights ready to die. But I never thought about death." Marcus was surprised. "Then what did you think about?" The gladiator closed his eyes. "Every breath." The sentence struck Marcus like a blade, shook him to the core. In the palace, no one needed to think about breath. No one needed to think about survival. No one fought to exist. But in the arena, every breath was a decision. Every breath, a choice. Every breath, a step between life and death. The gladiator continued, "One day you will fight too, Marcus, not in the arena, but in the shadow of Rome." Marcus's throat tightened. "I do not want to fight," the gladiator chuckled. "Neither did I." Then he lifted his head and looked at the dark sky. "Life doesn't ask if you want a war, Marcus. It only gives you one." That sentence foretold every battle Marcus would ever face. Political, psychological, military, all of them. As the night deepened, the gladiator shared a secret. Do you know why everyone dies in the arena? Yet I'm still here? Marcus leaned in. Why? The gladiator placed a hand on his heart. Because I never killed my opponents out of hatred. I never feared them either, but I never underestimated them. Marcus tried to understand. The words were simple, but inside them was steel-like wisdom. The gladiator continued. The moment you underestimate someone, you become blind to them, and the blind man dies. A chill ran through Marcus. Because in the palace, everyone underestimated someone. Generals underestimated philosophers. Philosophers underestimated soldiers. Politicians underestimated everyone. And Marcus now understood. Rome was not destroyed by barbarians, but by its own blindness. After a long silence, Marcus asked softly, "Then why don't you underestimate me?" The gladiator turned and looked straight into Marcus's eyes. "Because you listen." That sentence changed Marcus's life. The power of an emperor was not in his armies, but in his ability to listen. In that moment, Marcus saw another truth. The gladiator was not merely a friend. He was a master of shadows, a teacher of survival, a guide offering something Marcus would never find in the palace, the naked truth. As Marcus turned to leave the arena, the gladiator called after him, "Marcus." He turned. The gladiator spoke calmly. Sometimes the thing that makes a man an emperor is not the men in his palace, but the friends he keeps in the dark. That night, as Marcus walked back to the palace, he did not feel alone. For the first time, he carried a truth. The man who understood him was outside the palace walls. And this friendship would become one of the most hidden bonds in the history of Rome. Chapter V, The Gladiator's Secret, the truth Marcus had never heard. Days changed Marcus. Every passing day shaped him a little more. But one day, for the first time, he saw a different shadow on the gladiator's face. Heavier, more tired, more silent. When Marcus descended into the arena chambers, he found him alone. In his hand was a bracelet, torn, worn, stained with old blood now faded. The gladiator stared at it for a long time. When Marcus approached, the gladiator tried to hide it, but it was too late. "What is that?" Marcus asked. The gladiator took a deep breath, as if opening a box of memories he had not touched in years. "This," he said, "is my freedom, my will." Marcus did not understand. How could a bracelet be freedom? The gladiator opened it. Inside was a name, Gaius Varro. Marcus stepped back. Is that your name?" The gladiator nodded. "Everyone calls me the monster of the arena, but no one knows my real name. This name," he paused, "is who I was before I fell into the arena. This name is the last fragment of my former self." Marcus felt his breath falter. For the first time, he realized the gladiator had a past, a life, a family. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Marcus asked. The gladiator smiled, a smile sharpened by pain. "Because when people hear my name, they start thinking I'm human. They start believing I am one of them. But here in the arena, Marcus, I am not a man. I am a role, a ghost, a machine made for death. Here, you cannot carry a name." Marcus fell silent, because that silence carried something too deep for words. "Loss," the gladiator continued. "You were born in a palace, Marcus. I was born in chains. You grew up with books. I grew up with blood." Then he took a step closer. "You listen to me because in your world, silence is a luxury. In mine, silence is survival." Marcus's throat tightened. This man, a slave, a prisoner, a gladiator, yet the story inside him weighed more than 1,000 philosophers. A philosopher's words strike like a slap, but this gladiator's words struck harder than any philosopher could. The gladiator looked down at the arena floor. You know, Marcus, I once wanted to be a soldier, to protect Rome. But one wrong accusation, one wrong man, one wrong decision. His breath trembled. Threw me here. Marcus felt something break inside him. For the first time, he saw how merciless Rome's justice could be. Why didn't you resist? Marcus asked. Why didn't you escape? Why didn't you fight back? The gladiator didn't answer. He picked up a small stone, squeezed it in his hand. Running is easy, he said at last. Staying is hard. Then he looked straight at Marcus. That's why I'm not surprised to see you here, Marcus. You're one of those who choose to stay, those who choose to face fear. Marcus's vision darkened, because for the first time in his life, someone had seen his future. Marcus, the gladiator said, one day you will carry Rome's greatest burden. And that burden is not the crown, but the suffering of the people. Then he held the bracelet out to Marcus. This is my past, but it's too heavy for you to carry. Just remember one thing. Fate does not walk the paths we choose. It draws the paths we must walk. Marcus pushed it back gently. No, this is your identity. Never let it go. If you let it go, your link to life breaks. The gladiator smiled. It wasn't the smile of a broken man, but of a man who had accepted truth. I know who I am, Marcus. Then he added, what matters is who you will become. Before you remind others who they are, you must remember who you are. That night, when Marcus returned to the palace, he felt heavier, quieter, more resolute. A different Marcus walked those halls. A warrior closer to the wisdom he sought, Rome's future philosopher emperor. He could never have learned these truths from any teacher so quickly, because now he understood. True wisdom is not learned from philosophers, but from those who have walked through blood. Your greatest teacher is the wound buried deepest in you. The gladiator was gone, but his silence remained. And in that silence, Marcus saw the truth. Some friendships do not die, they rebirth you. If this story touched you, leave one sentence. True friendship is understood in silence. And subscribe, so we meet again in the next story. Stay stoic.